a Mews Systems podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Mewscast with me, Richard. I'm the founder of Mews Systems, and I'm here today with Benjamin from Quicktext and Jens from Pre. Today we're going to be talking about the change of hotel operations from a kind of static model to a much more responsive and real-time model that we see in this day and age in today's hotels and hostels. So maybe guys, if you could introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about your product.
So hi, I'm Ben from Quicktext. We make hotels able to have a direct and interactive customer relationship. So we centralize in one single platform all the instant communication channels that a hotel could use in order to interact with guests, and that guests could use in order to interact with the hotel. So that's Facebook Messenger, SMS, Line, WeChat, very soon WhatsApp, and also the live chat on the website of the hotel. And in order to ensure continuity of service, we added an artificial intelligence so that the guest will always be able to ask questions and get immediate answers that actually make sense, and also to make bookings in a conversational way, so that basically they can use their mobile and just ask what they need, and they won't need to browse or look for information. The information will actually come right at them.
And my name is Jens. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Pre, which was founded in 2016, last year. And our mission is to make revenue management more accessible and more fun and joyful for hotels out there. More than 90% of hotels around the world don't use any system still in today's age for their pricing. So they would essentially only do summer or winter pricing or even keep a fixed rate. And they're leaving a lot of money on the table, and we want to help them solve that problem.
Great. So I guess the first question will go to you, Jens. What do you think is the main draw of artificial intelligence? I mean, do you think that it mainly comes from being able to crack more data in a much faster way, or how do you see the true benefit of somebody using your service?
That's a good question, and I think there's so much talk around machine learning and artificial intelligence now that it's a world of buzzwords. But I think for us the two key components of this whole world of artificial intelligence is, one, the volume of data. So if you have a tremendous amount of data out there, that's what's called big data, and you're able to draw conclusions which nobody could draw before because they didn't have access to that type of data. Now the not so well hidden secret in AI is that almost nobody has big data. Almost everything is actually small data. Only companies like Google, Facebook, etc. have access to big data. But the other interesting component is speed and the frequency with which you can make change. So often when we think of robotics and AI, that's actually what we're thinking about. And that's what we put a lot of emphasis on. So for us, it's the ability with computers to make changes much more quickly and understand how to make them. So a self-driving car is a good example of both volume of data and speed, right? Because you could have all the data in the world and you could plot a decent chart for how you wanted to drive your car, but you also have to make responsive changes on the fly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. I think it applies in the same way, I guess, to any kind of messaging, because I guess there it's about response and how you can actually respond to a client asking a question about something, right?
Yes. So instantaneity is one of the features of artificial intelligence. From my perspective, artificial intelligence is also something you use in order to adapt to a new device, because on top of everything that Jens has said, we just moved from mostly web computer-based interface to a mobile interface. So artificial intelligence is like I don't like to say the new browser of the mobile. It's just a new way that people are going to interact like with hotels and companies, because basically you can't browse anymore on a small device. So you need to be able to ask for the information. The company in this case using artificial intelligence has to understand what each customer needs in order to be able to present at the right time, so instantaneously, the right information plus probably a trigger to buy. So artificial intelligence is about instantaneity and it's about relevance. It's about being able to reply just to present the right information at the right time, so that you will have probably a sale, because that's what company wants.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that kind of feeds into the problem of, I guess a machine never needs to kind of go off for a break, never needs to take time off or something like that. And I guess you get that kind of uniformity. But I think a lot of hotels or hoteliers could be worried about then those kinds of responses that they get, that they would be quite bland and quite kind of geared towards a certain kind of constantly kind of selling, whereas you don't really do that in a hotel. You try and kind of sweet talk people. What's your stance on that?
In France we say that science without conscience kills the soul. So basically we don't think that artificial intelligence alone in our context of customer interaction is sufficient, because we have to be clear about what artificial in my field is. It's about word recognition and putting people in the right, giving them the right predefined information, okay? Because artificial intelligence is not inventing stuff. It's about understanding what a guest needs, mapping it to what the artificial intelligence knows. So that's the first thing. So you always need a control. That's why, at least at Quicktext, what we do is every communication is copied on the interface, so that the guest can see, the hotel can see what the bot is answering. And also what we try to do is to make sure that the bot, as soon as he meets something he's not able to understand, he will call a human being, so the human can see what has happened. At the first sign of deficiency from the bot, it rings, so that the hotelier will come and actually give a satisfactory answer to the guest. So it's really about enhancing human work. It's not about replacing the human being. It's really about enhancing. And I don't know if for you, Jens, the question is appears on the same terms, because real-time pricing is something that basically has to be faster than a human being. So how do you handle this question?
No, I think I really like the way you've described it, and one way that's captured is by talking about augmented intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence, right? And I think that's an important distinction. We used to have, the last 20 years with advent of computers, we had machines, smart humans looking at Excel spreadsheets essentially and pulling out the information, but they had to drive the whole process. I think the next 10 years will be where the machine flags up errors for the humans to investigate, and the human will take the corrective action to say something went wrong here. But when the machine can't solve something, that's when the human should be flagged. They should not be constantly tied to the machine.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting, because it's almost going away from AI assistance, and basically it's actually human assistance for AI, which I think is quite an interesting topic in and of itself.
Yeah.
But I guess it basically then comes down to what should be the hotelier's role from first of all, let's take the prices. How should you be thinking of revenue management when you have an algorithm that can give you these kinds of data sources and give you these kinds of hints and tips on where your prices should be?
So the augmented intelligence we're talking about, it's actually, the point of it isn't to make people redundant. The point is to bring them into more interesting and more strategic areas of work. So I think the revenue manager we hope for in 5 years' time will be spending their time thinking about what are the objectives that I need to reach, what's the ADR, the average daily rate that I need to hit? What occupancy do I hit, and why? What difference does it make to my guest experience if I'm at 60% or 80%? What does that feel like in my property?
Mm-hmm.
What's the guest mix I want? Where should my customers be coming from? How should I be positioned in the market from a branding perspective? What should my price be? Should I be priced so that people have the expectation of a luxury hotel, or should it be priced so that they have different expectations? I think that's the human role, is defining the strategy and where you want to end up.
Mm-hmm.
What we wanted to build is an engine which will then reverse engineer, to use a technical term, from that. So you shouldn't be spending your time every hour of the day working out what the pickup was over the last hour. You should instead be saying, I want to hit 80% occupancy this month for this particular room category. Now you go out and solve that, and if something happens which moves away from these settings, then call me or send me an email. That's where we
to
want
basically
to get
inform you that the strategy you've set isn't working.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if we do a quick example of the complexity of, not the complexity, but actually the amount of decisions you have to take. If you have 365 days in a year, each of those days you will change prices for the following 365 days, and you have 4 different room types. That's 500,000 pricing decisions every year.
Yeah.
And we basically think that you should be spending your time thinking about the bigger picture, and most of those can be done in an automated way.
Because basically, I think that artificial intelligence solves a lot of non-questions, which are all the 500,000 questions that you don't ask yourself because you don't have time. So my job is not actually to save time to anybody. I'm just making sure that what's not done today is done effectively tomorrow. What I think is that, in terms of something that gives all hoteliers instant excitement is when you speak about direct bookings, for example. Hotels have been very angry at Booking.com because basically they say it takes booking from them. But if you look at what Booking.com does, it's more about standardizing an offer to make sure that they reach standard customers. Hoteliers on their website, they're doing exactly the same. They have actually, like most of the times, a website that is a crappier version of Booking.com. While instead they should look on personalization and making sure that the guests that come to their website is getting something special. And I'm not talking about I'm not speaking about a 10% discount because everybody's able to do that. It's not creative at all. In my perspective, for example, if on your website what you have to offer is a booking engine plus information, you're not doing a great job, and you're not actually offering an alternative to Booking.com. So don't find it strange if you don't get direct bookings. My idea is that, for example, if you want to be able to attract more guests, you should be able to offer the same information, but in a different format. And for me, that's interaction. How the guest asks a question he really cares about, and you give him an answer that fulfills his need, plus an invitation to book. Or you take him seamlessly to the booking engine in a mobile way just by interacting with him. That's what Booking.com cannot do today, probably will do it in the future. But I'm just saying that you have an opportunity. So far, hoteliers, like in my field, what they have not been doing is being able to create a real and meaningful interaction with the guest. Like before bookings, that's 100% sure. While they're at the hotel, because instant messaging works very well when the guest is at the property, is something else, because basically Expedia now gets more feedback in-house than the hotel. And basically I'm just helping hotels do something they didn't do before without adding any manpower. So you have two ways to look at things, and it's very important. The first one is, are we here to take somebody else's job? Which is, I think, in England, something that people really are afraid of. Brexit. And the second thing is, are we here to make something impossible possible? Something you couldn't do before, make you able to do it. And that's, I think, what I choose.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. I think just before we started the podcast, we were talking quite a bit about personalization, and I think we all agree that in one way or another, it's a great thing to aim for and to go towards. But I think that the first start of that is actually just figuring out how to actually think about your data and how to even segment it before you can actually think of it down to an absolute individual's level. Because again, I think that comes back to what you were talking about with really the big data and having those repositories of that big data to be able to actually provide that to the eventual interface, whether that's a pricing interface or whether it's some kind of messaging interface. But I think what's very, very interesting about the kind of things that you guys are talking about is then applying it to the actual environment of the hotel. I mean, does it basically mean that you shouldn't really have a sales team, or what does your sales team do, or that you shouldn't really have a receptionist team, talking prior to the customers, or should it just be basically people that are then reactive? How does the hotel operation actually look in your eyes once you have your tools in place? Do you think it looks very much similar to how it is today, or how would you try and basically architect it around your solutions?
Richard and Matt, the founders of Mews, did a really great presentation at the recent conference in Amsterdam on hotels as startups. And to pick up on that thread, there is no one size fits all for hotels here. I think it really has to start with, and I think this will increasingly be the case in a world where there are big online engines, OTAs, aggregators, meta search. It's increasingly difficult for brands to cut through the noise and have their own identity. And I think what that means is you really need to understand what your identity is and what your brand is. If you're building up a brand which is all about personal experience, then that will be reflected in how you deal with front desk. If you're building up an experience which is all about quick in and out, check in, check out, I don't want to deal with people, I'm traveling in business, then you have to optimize for friction removal. So that would be my answer, that you have to have a long, hard look at what type of experience you want your guests to have and then optimize for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that most hotels today are not actually offering an experience because they are in between too many systems, and at least in my once again in my field, I'm just transforming into putting experience into something that was not experiential at all, because what I'm doing is making information available to the right guest at the right time. So basically, today the guest asks one question and it goes unanswered. The guest wants to speak to you through a particular channel that, you just don't happen to like as a hotel. Who cares? The guest cares. The guest wants to speak to you through this channel. You just have to oblige. So I wouldn't put that into a human versus machine kind of debate. It's just that today, when you want to ask a question to a hotel, it's just impossible. We usually seeing people that are afraid that machines will do their job someday. But let's be honest, most of the time hotels don't offer an experience. Really, we all speak about it, we picture it, but it's not real most of the time, because basically people are too busy with their systems. So one of the main jobs of artificial intelligence is to deal with all the repetitive tasks, and so that people are available, and also so that you don't need people that have no skills, because there is something that will happen. Of course, the low skill jobs won't be in such a high demand, but that's something global. That doesn't only impact the hotel industry. What you want in a hotel are people that are really able to create an experience. So maybe you'll have less people picking data, typing data, but you'll have much more people welcoming. So I think, yes, you don't need any more receptionists. What you need are welcomers. And that's just a different need. you don't need people to know how to do a check-in, because that's something that should be instinctive or very fast, or that also guests could do. You don't need people to repeat the information that's on the website. It's just that your guests don't know how to read, and you can't blame them for that, because your website is not, like, they don't have time to spend doing that. So you just need to be aware that the world is changing. That, of course, jobs appear and disappear every day, but like, focus on the first thing I've said, they appear also every day. 10 years ago, you didn't have space in the market for welcomers, you had receptionists. Now you have welcomers, that are people that will make the guest feel happy at the hotel, and the guest will have 100% of their attention, which is impossible with the technology that 99% of hotels have today.
I think that's a really good point, and you.
Cool, because I wasn't sure, because I was listening to myself at the same time. And,
well, that's
I was
always
really afraid.
A danger is listening to yourself. No, I think it's a really good point, and I think we forget the importance of the small things, like the front desk. You know, what do we think that the purpose of that is?
Why do you have a front desk?
Yeah, and it goes back to, are we training people that the purpose of front desk is to collect information, or that it's something else, or that it's to welcome somebody in? So one example I had recently at the Teleport, which is one of Mews customers. All of our customer.
We love you.
Love you. So
love you.
Greetings going out to Michael and David there, who have done a great job on their front desk, trying to move away the horrible, boring parts, but keep the good parts, because it's actually a great experience to have somebody welcome you. So we came back in to the hotel at 1 a.m. after the Mews conference, and we were greeted not with a form that we had to fill out, because that was already done, but what we were greeted with is kind of a few tips on where we could go in the building. Would you like a Corona before going to your room? Unfortunately, we accepted, which was a bad idea at 1 a.m. But you know, the thinking behind it was very
the right kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I guess basically the last thing that I want you guys to talk about as well, and I think a lot of the time, and I guess both the messaging and both in the pricing, a lot of people make a lot out of segmentation, and that you should be pricing per segment, or you should be talking to particular customers in a particular way. I think both of your solutions seem to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but actually much more kind of general. Like, why do you think that that's a good path, or do you agree?
Well, I think the reason segments have been out there for a while. There's segments, there's rate codes, and then there's channels. Now, we generally think, and this has happened in lots of other industries as well, that segmentation is only useful if you can do something with them. So what can you do with them? So you segment and you say, this group of guests are business travelers, and this group of guests are family, etc. But what can you do with that? If most of them are booking through booking.com, how do you know who is who? That's a common problem in the industry. So I think segmentation falls down there in a very big way. And I think the question on rate codes, we have a lot of customers who we're talking to who, before working with us, were using 20, 30 rate codes. Now, again, the question is, what do you do with all of them? How do you know which ones work when you have 30 different ones in play at the same time? How do you understand when to move one in and when not? And I think a lot of the time, that complexity with rate codes and segments is a way to obscure the fact that we actually we don't know some very basic things. And those are the ones we are trying to find out. So that the simple question which we put to our science team and our algorithms is, I'm at 60% occupancy. I have 60% on the books. Check-in happens in 3 weeks' time. Is 60% good or bad? Will it move up or will it not? Where will it get to? And the most important question is, should I move my price up or down? Because it's not a given. Moving occupancy up is not always a good thing. If you can keep occupancy at the same rate and move prices up, maybe that's a better thing. So these are some of the simple things simple questions, but really hard to work out what we're trying to solve. And rate codes just don't help you there, because they just add to the complexity and add to the confusion.
Yes, regarding like segmentations, I think that there is one thing that is important, one keyword, it's relevance. If you look at instant communication channels that have like 100% read when you send a message, like you're sure or 99% sure that the person will receive it and she will receive it now. So basically you want to make sure that if the person is reading it, you have the responsibility to make it meaningful.
What I was trying to draw out from both of you for that is basically that I think a lot of people talk about segmentation and that you need to do it now, but you can't do that without actually having the data, without actually asking people what they, without actually delivering that data in the first place. A lot of it is, at the moment in hotels, I think done by design. So you design the segments and then hope that your customers go into it. We see that from the PMS angle so many times where, we can see that loads of PMSs would have preset categories about, what's the origin of the business. And the fact is that actually you should be doing this once you have all of that data in some kind of repository. You shouldn't be doing it by design to say, well, this is the actual category, because those categories might be very, very diverse, and you need to have a part before where you actually get those answers from the people. So, for example, in your case, it's about asking the questions to the customer so that they actually give you those questions so that you can actually start building out a proper data factory from it. In the price side as well, it's exactly what you were talking about, just knowing what is the difference between setting a price that's higher at 60% versus it lower. So it's all about trying to get all of those kind of data points to refine an algorithm, to refine some kind of segmentation, because then you can start to split it out once you've actually been on that path. And I think that's something that a lot of the time in the hotels, people do it the other way around, that they think this is the expected result, let me build an entire model. And it's essentially just confirmation bias. It's basically just saying, this is what I think is the expected result, and oh look, 55% of those results have come in that way. And I think that is genuinely how things like guest communication, whether it's any kind of CRMs or pricing management, that's generally what I think we've seen in the hotel industry, that it's the other way around to how it really should be.
And I agree with almost everything. I think that was really well put. But I think there is something to segments. I think the way I think about segments versus segmentation versus personalization is that it's a spectrum, and that in the 50s and 60s we started to do advertising which was targeted to different people, right? And you start with young, old, men, women. Those are segments, and then over time they become more and more sophisticated. So then you have young urban professional people, the yuppies, and then you have double income, no kids, the dinks, etc. And you start to break them down. And what's happening is that if you stick to those categories, you will be missing out on all the detail in the middle, because people are different. And the last 5 years, there's been an explosion of personalized content with social media, etc., etc. And that's really the core of machine learning, is creating thousands of segments which are so small that we could never imagine them. So on Facebook, you can target a group of people, which is 200. There's only 200 people like this in Europe, and you can send those people a targeted message, right?
Yeah.
And there's no way that if we sat down with all the data in the world as humans, could make that stuff up. And the other part of machine learning is to reevaluate those and recreate them in a dynamic way as new data comes in. So I think that's where Mews is really taking the right approach by not predefining them, but instead saying what we will do is we'll gather the data and we'll structure it. But we know that there will be tons of different ways of looking at how to approach this.
Yeah, definitely segmentation is not, well, it's usually something fixed when we imagine this. Today it's more about interaction. Like interaction is a contrary of segmentation because it takes you, like segmentation takes you back to a time where marketing was one way. You just sent your message to the population you wanted to. You didn't really expect a reply. You expected a behavior maybe. And it was among so many people that if you had 1% response, you were very happy. Now the idea is that you focus much more on people that have like their own personality and that you want to be able to bond with. And I think before there was nothing related to bonding in marketing because basically you didn't need to. You just threw away your information like a bottle in the sea, and you would expect people to come to you. Now it's much more interaction. It's much more getting people in several strokes and being able to. That's the base of a relationship actually. I think it's now that we're starting to have a real customer relationship. Because before it was just targeted messages.
Expected answer, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, like I think that's a great point that you raise, is that, you know, I think the modern approach to marketing is in being able to ask the right question to the right customer, rather than saying this is the question for that customer.
No,
this is the expected answer.
This is the expected answer. Do not expect an expected answer.
Yeah. And I think that's great, you know, then basically to take that to kind of refine the question that you're asking. And I think that's I think a kind of explosion where you basically are designing that question based on the questions that went wrong, basically, rather than thinking about the data that fit that particular model that you wanted to kind of explore.
Do you know I like Bergson. I don't know if you know this guy. He's famous in his blog, and he used to say, we don't see things, we focus on the tags we put on them. And I think it's time to stop putting tags on people, because at one point I can be a business traveler, company owner, but like on Sundays maybe I'm a backpacker. And I'm the same person. I'm just two segmentations. And how do you know when, like, you have to find the right moment to speak to me the way I want to, and that's the challenge we try to answer. But for that you have to really listen, and that's something I think I won't make any friends here, but that hoteliers are not really comfortable doing, because they think it's a lot of manpower they need, because they use like old systems that make it impossible. It's possible. It's for all hotels, because basically the magnitude of the problem, if you have 400 rooms, is the same. Actually, it's even more important to create a relationship if you have 40 rooms. And usually 400 room hotels are better at it, because they really put like a lot of effort into this. But smaller hotels, they don't realize that they need to do it too, and it's not something for only a kind of hotels. It's something for everybody, because everybody is equal in front of Booking.com, and if you're not able to create personalization, I think you should just quit trying to have any direct market and just sell everything on Booking and Expedia, which is totally doable. But you have to know that if you want to have what we call a direct market, you need to be able to interact with people in a direct and meaningful way. Otherwise, just go to Booking.com and Expedia, and that will cost you less money and less headaches.
I'm still stuck on, which I think is great, don't expect the expected answer. I wonder if we have a new tagline for Quicktext in there somewhere. One of our first taglines was "The price is always wrong." As a reference to the terrible TV show. And it's the same sort of principle, right? Like the price is always wrong, because it's always moving, because customers are always moving, and no condition is ever the same.
The generals always know how to fight the last war. And I think that's a great place to end, and I want to thank both of you for the discussion, and I want to thank all of you that have listened all the way to the end for this Mewscast. So hopefully sometime again in the future, and thanks both of you for coming down.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A Mews Systems podcast.